Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Wandering Road Podcast. I'm your host Chris, alongside my co-host Dean, and today's episode is part 2 of the UFO UAP discussion. How are you doing today, buddy?
This one's going to be good because we did such a good job last time just talking about going down rabbit holes and talking about all kinds of interesting aspects of what's going on in the media with UFOs and UAPs and whatnot. But I think I'm all coffeeed up and ready to go. How about you?
Same here, man. I've been looking forward to this conversation, going down those rabbit holes, like you say. So you want to kick us off here? Because I know last time we had quite a few things that we got through, but we didn't get to cover the rest of them. And that's what our plan is for today. So let's jump right into it. You want to kick us off with potential ramifications on national security?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the most prevalent part of the discussion that society has if and when this thing kind of blows open. Because, I mean, people in general are driven by fear, especially in mass, like when they live in a collective, which, they should be. I mean, I guess it's maybe not to the degree that they are now, but like it's part of human nature and any natural nature to be wary and unsure about something that can cause destruction for you and your family and whatnot, or your tribe. I think that's the first thing that's going to happen. And so before in the last episode, we talked about how governments around the world could be using these stories of UFOs and UAPs as kind of a deflection or embellishing them in such a way to cause fear. However, let's just say hypothetically, let's push that to the side and say hypothetically now that the UAP phenomena is real and a lot of the government, including those Congress people who were a part of that recent panel, don't really know what's going on. And this thing is this Pandora's box is open and it's not going to be closed again. So let's just pretend that, it's all true and it's not deflection. And maybe in the next, let's say in the next 3 to 6 months, aliens are officially revealed or extraterrestrials are officially revealed. Let's just say UFOs are hovering over several major cities and they're clearly visible. What's the next step? I think the next conversation and the next big piece that people are going to freak out about is national security and defense. We don't have to just talk about the military side. We can also talk about what societies might demand. And because that's even harder to kind of conceive of if and when such an event would occur. If people look at that, do you think that most people would feel fear and panic in this day and age? Or do you think that most people, the general consensus in societies, would just be like a one of awe and interest?
I think it'll go through stages. You'll have your awe moment at first, then the fear would set in, and then certain people would go into wholesale panic because their entire belief structure is completely eradicated, especially if you're of the mind that you're the only intelligent being in existence in the universe. So I think those people would go absolutely haywire. We would either see protests at the local government level or marches on the federal government level, and people demanding that they be protected somehow or given means for their own protection. And, we've always
a death laser.
Seen these people. Yeah, give us a death laser. Or you would see an uptick in these doomsday preppers coming together and going out into the woods like it's going to save them and forming these militias. That's what I think would happen. It would go from awe to like, holy shit, we're scared, to straight up panic. But that wouldn't be for everyone. I think it would be for like the people that think they have a lot to lose.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. What are your thoughts?
I think that you're spot on. I think that a lot of people would just be dumbstruck at first, and then there would be a subset of societies who would march on their government or demand. I would say that most people wouldn't be demanding like ways to protect themselves. I think they would demand information. They would accuse the government of knowing more information and not releasing it, and they want that info out of fear to know what they're dealing with. But here's an interesting concept that just popped into my head as we were discussing this. So if aliens have been here for a while, and there's been years and years of speculation that the governments around the world have information or intelligence or whatever on them, that means they must have a certain degree of awareness of what they're doing here. I mean, I don't doubt for one second, I do not doubt that there really are and have been subsets within the intelligence communities around the world who are studying these things, like scientists and huge contracting companies with aviation arms or whatever, like doing all kinds of crazy analysis and trying to understand what's going on with these phenomena. And they obviously know, if that they're doing that, and they have been doing that, they know way, way, way more than they're letting on. So I think, like you said, if and when this happened, people would demand that information to be released, and just so we get a better sense of why they're here and what they're doing here. The other thing that I wanted to talk about today that you just reminded me of is, so I don't know if you remember last time I just kind of name dropped the documentary on Netflix about the James Webb Space Telescope. I just watched it. It was such a good documentary. Anyone who's listening, I recommend you listen to it. I think it's called Undiscovered or something like that. It was such a massively detailed look into the development of the James Webb Telescope that I never knew about. Like it's like over a decade of a project that was initially thought to only going to cost like less than $1 billion. It ended up costing like $8 billion. There were like 344 single points of failure in the project, meaning that if any one of those points in any part of the process failed, the whole thing would fail. And then in early 2022, I believe, so not even like a year and a half ago, they released the first deep space image, the deepest we've ever seen, the farthest back in history we've ever seen. And if you don't know that the picture was the James Webb Telescope, I'm sure you almost have certainly at least seen the picture itself out in social media at some point. But every single point of light in that photo is its own galaxy, meaning that it's just like our galaxy, which potentially contains, well, I don't even know the metrics, like probably 100 trillion stars or 100 billion stars with 100 trillion planets in it, something crazy like that. And that's just one point of light in that map of millions and millions of, or thousands of points of light. So it's interesting to me that such a piece of technological advancement and scientific information happened to have come out and be widespread at a time or shortly before a time where people are renewing interest and sightings of UAPs and aliens. And it almost seems like it's a stage setter. I don't know if it's conspiratorial. It doesn't have to be conspiratorial. It doesn't have to be a massive, like the government or someone timing the release of this information or this point of advancement. It could be that the aliens are tracking our advancement, and maybe at some point they will decide that we've advanced enough to engage with us. I'm crossing my fingers that that point is coming up and that they're, benevolent and not here to destroy us. But sorry, to tie that all the way back in with national defense, even if they were here to engage with us and to help us scientifically and get like closer to peace as a civilization or whatever and expand outward, I think that there will always, always, always be people who are uncertain about their true presence and their true interest in us. So I think we talked about this before, but like, one perspective I'm curious about regards to your perspective. I wanted to know what you think about, like, how would you take it? Would you look at this phenomena, like say spacecraft hovering in the skies over major cities? Would you be on the fearful side, or would you be on the more open side?
I personally would be on a little bit of both.
That makes sense.
I'd be open to the prospect of them talking to us, communicating, letting us know like, hey, we're here, we want to help you guys out. But I'll also be skeptical. Okay, you want to help us out, but what do you want in return?
Right.
Do you consume carbon-based life forms for sustenance, for fuel? And that's just going based off of how people are and how our society is. It's like, okay, nothing is really free. So what do you want in return for this, first contact interaction? I think if you see anything massive coming out of the sky, your natural inclination would be like, what the fuck is that? Do I need to go underground? Shit, whether if it's a UFO or somehow a fucking pterodactyl.
Oh.
Like, it's like, dude, I don't want to be caught in the line of sight of this thing. So I'm going to lay low and see what's going on
No, it's gonna
first before.
just because you said that, what's gonna happen is this massive like football or like 2 mile object is gonna come down and it's just gonna be like, Chris. It's gonna be like, oh shit.
What?
What's Chris?
What would I do? There's like a billion of us. I'd probably shit myself. Like, what the fuck did I do? Like,
you are the savior of humanity. No, that's
that would turn into a Simpsons episode real quick. But I wanted to ask you, we talked about with national security, people going to protest, for their safety from their governments and stuff like that. What the hell could conceivably the governments do?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, what are you going to do? Deploy tanks? Like, these fuckers just flew across the galaxy. Like, I'm sorry, but your tank is not really going to do anything.
Here's the terrifying part, man. And I don't think people, even though I think most people wouldn't panic, I think most people aren't in tune enough with the inner workings of what you just brought up. Like, what could we possibly, I think they would still demand that the government do something, because like, what do you do when you're caught in a situation where there's no indication of support? You just demand it anyway. You just pray for it, or you hope that someone with some magical or crazy outline capability is going to come in and save the day, when you if you thought 2 seconds about it, that there really is nothing in some situations that is going to help you. If you're standing in a room with a hungry lion and you have nothing but a metal chair, you could try to swing that metal chair at that lion, but at the end of the day, you're probably just going to end up pissing it off and it's going to maul you anyway. So then again, that's kind of fair because like, the human spirit is a fighting spirit and whatnot, etc. But I still think that dumbness would kind of overtake a lot of people for lack of a better term. And they would probably try to force some kind of government intervention that if it didn't come to their sufficient desire or to meet their standards, they would try to take, like you said, people would try to take up arms themselves or try to, create these little covens of doomsday preppers and whatnot. But I don't think that would have a monumental impact on society. I think the only way we would seriously see a challenge or impact, I think the markets would probably tank. Initially, people would be pulling out all their assets and hoarding stuff. That's probably where the greatest societal danger comes from in the beginning. We talked about the political perspective, but I think that a lot of people, just like COVID, everybody, like look what happened during COVID. Like there was even just a minor inkling that people would run out of toilet paper, and everybody bought so much toilet paper and hoarded it, that a lot of people didn't get it for a while. So I think the same thing would happen that could strain the economic systems across the globe. So that could very well be a motivating factor by the governments to keep this sort of thing under wraps. I'm not saying it's justified, but that could really destabilize society. But before we go down the economic path of discussion, I also wanted to just talk about briefly, like, if we saw aliens come down or spacecraft come down and were hovering above major cities or something like that, I think one thing that a really in tune, very aware person would say is,
shit.
Well, no, because I was trying to go off of what you were saying, which is like, I wonder if they eat biologics. I wonder if they eat something. I wonder if they have to take the life of something, whether it's plant or animal or whatever, to sustain themselves. However, I would argue that if we're looking at spacecraft that are hovering above major cities that clearly have advanced technology way beyond our means or understanding, there's an indication there that they've either been here for a very long time or they have the technology to travel vast distances, which means they have an unlimited or near unlimited source of energy to pull from the universe. So I would be less in the fearful camp and more in the hopeful camp, because if you think for a second about what that would require an alien civilization to do, that also probably means that they've figured out a way to either synthesize sustenance or change their DNA to where they don't even need sustenance. If that makes any sense. So yeah, I guess it's possible that they could like be taking the cows and like, all those stories about in the back in the day of like, cattle showing up in a field that had precise incisions in it, and then all the blood was drained out, like those stories or whatever. I guess it's possible.
Yeah, I remember crop circles.
Yeah, but like the biologics, like there was a theory around like, the aliens need the blood to basically either clone food or they drink blood or something crazy like that. And it was also tied, by the way, to like stories like that were tied to Chupacabra, which is another story we should talk about at some point. But I personally think that if aliens are truly aliens in the sense that we think of them, like they are advanced biologic individuals who have evolved over time somewhere else, like millions of years, they almost certainly have a way to sustain themselves that doesn't require them to take anything from us or destroy us or anything like that. So that's kind of the camp that I occupy for right now.
I do have a question for you. You mentioned the stuff with the cow mutilations, which completely slipped my mind. That was kind of like a big thing in the 90s, and my mom is Hispanic. That's always a big thing in like Spanish news, La Chupacabra. They would show like, dead cows and livestock with these like puncture wounds in their jugular, and their bodies completely drained of blood, or their organs cut out, like a medical procedure occurred on them. If that was the case, I promise we won't get stuck on this for too long. If they just needed livestock, why wouldn't they just fucking ask? Ask.
Even better yet. So here's the interesting thing with those stories. If you think about it, if someone or something has the ability to surgically remove or create incisions in an animal in an open field and drain out the blood in such a way as to where there's no drop of biologics around that body, then it's almost certain that thing, if it was intelligent, would know that by leaving it there, it would be leaving behind a trail of evidence to suggest that whatever did this was advanced. So it could mean two things. It could mean either the thing that did it is not intelligent and self-aware. Maybe it's just some mythical creature like El Chupacabra or something like that, who just doesn't have any, that just happened to be how it consumes biologics. More likely, something that does that such sort of thing would know that if it leaves the carcass behind, it's going to get found, or it might get found. And then there might be evidence revealed about what that thing knows or what it is doing here or whatever, or that it's even just here. So it's very possible that whatever left those cattle carcasses behind after doing that wanted people to find it. So that kind of leads me to think that humans are involved. I kind of think I'm more in the camp with those stories that maybe it's some insane group of like medical doctors, or like, or some cult, some kind of crazy cult that does these things. Because I mean, it's totally possible that maybe they laid down some tarp that, caught all the blood that splattered out, and they really did have a surgeon in their cult team who, performed this sacrifice, and then they cleaned up thoroughly afterwards. Who knows, man? There's any number of things.
I mean, you're going to have to be talking about a lot of crazy surgeons, because not only does this happen in the Caribbean, Central America, some parts of South America, the Midwest of the U.S., the Plains, Skinwalker Ranch. So you're talking about a lot of places. But I'll tie this back up to the national security question. Based off of that evidence that we have, so let's say we're in a war room, right? And UFOs, aliens have made themselves known to us. We're briefing whoever, the commander in chief, based off of the evidence that we have from the past 70 years. They abduct people. We have crop circles. We have fucking dissected animals that are missing their organs and completely drained of blood. The more you think about it, the more the national security question comes into play. Okay, how do we protect ourselves from this? Because based off of what they've done in the past, and that's assuming those are the same extraterrestrials that did this, but we don't know, because we don't have any way of figuring out who did it. This hypothetical is going off of, we don't know much other than it's like, we know they exist, we have disclosure, they made themselves known, but we have all this evidence to say that, dude, they were treating us like fucking science experiments. Who says that's not going to happen more in the open? So from the national security perspective, it's like, okay, can we down one of these crafts and reverse engineer their technology? Like, at what point, what can we actually do to protect ourselves, Do we get all the brilliant minds, scientific minds together? Do we get Elon Musk and all these billionaires to pool all their resources? Because I know the Navy has railguns and stuff. That's been in the news. Do we use resources to amp up that technology? But I'll digress and let you
Here's a
take
scary
over.
thought. This has been a theory that's been around for a while, so it's not really just a random thought. It's something that we as a society have been aware of for a while. Some individuals claim that the governments around the world who are privy to the presence of aliens and UFOs and UAPs and whatever, like we talked about in the last podcast, it's very possible. In fact, I think that there are some indications that these governments around the world have used these concepts of aliens and alien technology as a way to instill fear and uncertainty in people. Maybe you can argue that that is not usually intentional, but I think I would argue that it is intentional. And think about, here's the scary thought I was going to try to bring up, which is it could very well be that one of the governments around the world or multiple governments around the world could be funding such an endeavor to make it seem like aliens are doing these terrible things, like taking people, probing them, doing scientific experiments on them, draining the blood out of cattle and leaving the carcasses. That would be a situation in which it would make sense to leave the cattle behind. If you have some entity that is a human entity tied into it that wants to instill fear and uncertainty about the true nature of things in this world, like aliens or cryptids or whatever, you would have someone who has unlimited resources go out and do such a thing that just doesn't make sense and leave the evidence behind for people to speculate on, to drive fear and uncertainty. I think that there's evidence that that's happening, and it's happening today, and it's been happening for a while, but especially today with all these stories of alien technology and aliens or whatever. My thinking is that either the governments around the world who are responsible, or not even, I shouldn't just say governments, because you can't, if you just blanket state and say like, oh, governments in general, you're literally implying that everybody within the government knows about this. That's ridiculous. There would have to be shadow subsets or whatever, like inlays upon inlays within the governments who are collaborating across like international lines and stuff like that, or have resources that stretch upon different parts of the world. That makes sense that's happening. But the question is why. They either know that what the aliens are doing, they either know what the aliens are doing here, or they don't know and they're afraid and they need to instill fear so they can do this thing that you're talking about, which is justifying the ramping up of defense and national security and all that stuff that we saw during the war on terrorism. But the war on terrorism, that's kind of like a bad example in this case, because those events of terrorism were very tangible. I mean, you can always talk about the theory, like the 9/11 conspiracy theory, which, I kind of bought into for a while. But now it's kind of like, the whole theory that the governments around the world fabricated the attacks on 9/11 and all that stuff. And that drove fear and uncertainty. And that really poured a lot of money into defense spending to combat terrorism, when in reality, such an event of an attack on the homeland was so unlikely that not only I don't doubt for a second that we did things to prevent future attacks. Even without the defensive measures that we put in, I think that it would still be unlikely to be recreated to that magnitude. So in a way, all the defense that we spent on was put towards going downrange to engage with terrorists in other countries. And we all saw how that worked out. Like people who fought in Afghanistan for like, almost a decade, they made progress and there was all kinds of advancements in society over there, but democracy just wasn't compatible with that society. And now we've regressed back into Taliban rule, and it's almost like a lot of it was for naught. What a terrible situation for people who poured their heart and soul into that. And not to go down, I'm sorry, that's kind of a tangent, but to tie it back into the alien technology side and whatever, I think that the same thing could be happening again, whether intentional or unintentional, where we see this new possible threat. And like I said, it's not really good to tie in terrorism, because terrorism really was a serious threat that actually killed people. But the alien side, there's no indication that they're actually harming people actively or they want to harm us. In fact, I would argue that if they have such advanced technology, they would fabricate some, super COVID to wipe us all out in a matter of weeks if they wanted to remove us from the planet. Like, that would be so easy for them to do. So why haven't they done something like that yet? And I think the answer is they're not here to do that. But going back to the defensive side, like I said, I think that there are entities in this world tied to maybe even the economics of this world, who have a lot of funding and resources, like you said, who want to retain their resources, who want to retain what they currently own, they might be behind fabricating, or they could be behind fabricating such a fear of aliens and alien technology and presence. So maybe the aliens are aware of that, and they don't want to risk destabilizing society because they know that these people in power have the purse strings and they have the control. So maybe they don't want to engage just yet. I don't know. Things might change in the near term, though.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up with people in power, the wealthy wanting to keep their assets and their power. That perfectly segues into the economic aspect of things. Because why would the extraterrestrials care? What does our economy, which is, it's not a living, breathing thing. I want to preface this by saying the economy is something that is man-made for us to understand our existence, how to give and receive goods and services. That's how we built our society. That's how it functions. Who's to say that the extraterrestrials don't have an economy? It's all a system of, we're just here to explore, and we've gotten to a point where we're way past that. Our technology allows us to not care about that stuff. We have everything automated. We have replicators. We have robots doing this. We have AI doing this stuff, which gives us the ability to just explore and grow. So you mentioned the hypothetical of these people wanting to keep their power. Why would the extraterrestrials care about that? If that, I know I'm kind of asking you an unfair question because you're not an extraterrestrial, and if you are one, I would hope you'd let me know, because
Well, I have a
fucking
surprise
awesome,
for you, Chris. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, put your tongue.
What's that thing coming out from behind your head?
Dude, why are you turning green? I'm kidding. But seriously, like, why would that external force care about the economic ramifications? Because they're probably at a point where they are beyond that, and they're like, well, we have this technology that makes it so you don't need that stuff. You don't need an economy. People don't need to work. They could just exist as human beings and thrive as a civilization, doing what you want to do and exploring what you want to explore. Because I'll be honest with you, man, I'd rather go out for a bike ride during the day as opposed to fucking sitting on the computer as a PM. I'm sure you know what that feels like. It's boring. Again, I don't mean to ramble, but back to the question: why would economics even matter to an external civilization that can travel the galaxy?
I see what you're getting at, and I do have an answer for you that I think that most people don't want to think about, and it's just because it's a very sad fact about human nature. It's
that your economy doesn't matter.
No, well, here's the thing. I think the economy does matter because I think that if the structure of the economy went, let's say hypothetically, aliens came down and they gave us all this technology that completely removed our independence for fuel and commerce, and we suddenly have an overabundance of food, and we didn't need to go out and make money to purchase that food. Nobody would need to be around to sit in a restaurant to make delicious food of varieties and stuff, all that stuff. Like even if aliens has had some magic way to fabricate most of the things that we require, and it completely removed like 99% of people's need to go out and do things to get what they want, to work to get what they want. They could just snap their fingers and get it. The sad fact is that most humans don't have. Okay, let me backtrack for a second. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to say most humans. Let's say an abundance. Let's say a lot of humans, quite a few humans. Even you and I, like to a certain degree, might fall prey to such things I'm about to talk about. But like, have you ever heard of the free rider rule or the free rider concept in like public policy? Have you ever heard of that?
No,
okay.
Why don't you?
So just essentially the free rider concept is that when you create a political structure or an institution that gives aid or gives out something for free to people, or gives them an overabundance of something that is easily accessible, then you will have a subset of those people exploiting that and using the system in a way that it was not intended for. And we see that across societies. And it's just an unfortunate part of subsidies and stuff like that happens in governments across. Like, for instance, we just in, oh God, what African country is it? Was it Ethiopia? No, it was, I'm sorry. I apologize to people. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's an African country in the news today where I think the United Nations and the United States stopped sending grains to it because it was found out that at the municipality level within that country, there were systems in place to steal most of that grain and sell it or hoard it or whatever. So it wasn't getting to the people that needed it. That's kind of an example of the free rider rule. But what I'm really getting at is if you took away all the components of society that required people to work and produce effort to generate effort to get something that they wanted, then you would have people who were lazy. people would not leave their homes. I mean, okay. I think a lot of people like you and I.
I mean, we have that now.
We have to work.
We
have to work.
That now.
You literally can't just go play games all day or go outside and take a bike ride. Neither can I, because we have families we're responsible for. And that's because we have a job that requires us to do certain things to generate certain products or whatever. If that went away, I think not you and I specifically, or I think, I think there are plenty of people who are responsible who would really use their time to create art and beautiful things and explore and engage in the world and really just enjoy in a reasonable way that is, not just acceptable, but what's the word I'm thinking of, that's just, it's not harmful to themselves or others. But I think that a lot of people out there would also collapse into obesity and alcoholism and all kinds of other terrible things initially, at least. I think that such a shock by removing the economy would create that in the short term. But it's possible that if the aliens were benevolent and they did want to work with us in terms of creating a more utopian society, then maybe they could alleviate and even accelerate our society to not collapse and fall prey to such things. But I think initially, we would just have a massive shock to our economy. And going back to your question, that could very well be why the aliens would care about our economy and not disrupting it, is because initially it would create such a widespread, because let's be honest, they're not going to come down and give us some amazing technology that removes like 99% of our need to go out and work and get food and enjoy life and all that stuff. They're just not going to give us or have that technology available. So if they came down and gave us like unlimited free energy, that would completely disrupt the energy sector, including cars. It would include utility companies and everybody, the tens of millions of people across the globe who work for that would reverberate through the economy, and it would really put strain on us.
The same companies that take advantage of their workers.
No.
And fleece us all the time.
No.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm not advocating. I'm not saying that these companies they deserve to be around, and the people who own them deserve to be in power and do what they're doing. I'm just saying that if we took away the structure or pieces of structure of the economy, it would reverberate in such a way that we would have financial collapse around the world and people would suffer from it. That's all I'm saying.
In my hypothetical, I don't know if I explained it correctly, or if I even mentioned the hypothetical, which I'm going to do now. So in my hypothetical, the extraterrestrials that come down, they do have this technology that can elevate our society immediately to the point where we have unlimited energy. We have unlimited resources, to the point where it's like, okay, of course, we would still have things in place saying that you can't just fucking be an alcoholic all day. I think as we progress through our society, there would be some guidelines and some rules put in place. I don't think laws and stuff would be tossed out the door. It would be shifted for that new type of existence. Because if you look on like social media and TikTok and stuff like that, and people that tell their life story and whatnot, so many people that are like in these corporate positions and whatnot, and when you ask them what they really wanted to do with themselves, oh, I wanted to be an artist, I wanted to cook, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that, but I couldn't. And why? Because I had to focus on money. So if you take the money aspect out of it, I think the only people that would suffer per se are the people that are in power that have this system to take advantage of everyone else because they know they can. So if the extraterrestrials come down and say, hey, look, for example, let's use Star Wars technology. It's not Star Wars, I'm sorry, Star Trek technology. Replicators. We can use replicators. There you go. You have what you need. Transporters. There you go. You can use that to travel, like these airships, whatever energy that you need, whatever resource that you need, we can provide it to you. So you don't have to go digging for coal. You don't have to do digging for this. You don't have to do digging for that. And there'll be no longer a need for money. Because why do we do anything for money? Most people do everything that we do, aside from our leisurely activities, we do for money. And I think, this is just me, that if you have an extraterrestrial race that comes down and say, hey, y'all take this, y'all are good, you don't have to deal with any more problems, nobody's going to go hungry, nobody's going to do this, nobody's going to do that. Of course, there's always bad eggs. It's inescapable. There are always people that are going to try to game the system, try to take advantage, try to get a leg up. But what you would have in turn, I believe, over time, is people that'll do things because they want to do it. Kind of like these people that are artists that don't make a lot of money, but they still do art every day because they love it. You have some folks that cook some of the best meals I've ever had in my life, but they're not professional chefs. But that would give them the avenue to go down that route, in the sense that, hey, I can actually do what I want to do what I believe my life's calling is, if that makes sense.
I mean, that would be an absolutely beautiful change for society.
Mine is my idea is very idealistic. It's taking optimism to the extreme when it comes to these extraterrestrials.
Yeah, I think so. One caution, and I mean, I don't know. I can't sit here and pretend like what would happen to our economy and the globe if suddenly everybody had everything that they ever needed at their fingertips that wasn't harmful to themselves or others. But I would say that there are a lot of people out there, because think about it this way: if aliens came down, gave us technology to give us everything and anything we needed, not necessarily what we wanted, there would still be want among a lot of people, because there are people out there who, while they might in that scenario not have to work anymore, they might not have to pursue something meaningful outside of their home. I think a lot of people do need that. I think a lot of people would go crazy without something to do, without some kind of like effort to work towards. And not everybody would figure out another way to provide that effort for themselves to sustain themselves. I mean, a lot of scientists or doctors they argue that like one of the reasons why elderly people stay alive longer is because they have a sense of purpose. So that's why a lot of service animals and dogs occupy old folks' homes, because the argument is that by having a dog around and having a need to turn your attention to something that needs love and affection and attention, that effort is giving a reason to live. And I think that if we took away that, I think a good amount of people, maybe even, I would admit to myself, maybe even someone like me, like would become complacent and depressed that I don't have something to work towards anymore, in the sense that, I mean, of course I would love to spend time with my family and whatever, but I think some people would also have issues dealing with that sudden loss of purpose. But not just that. Imagine a situation like I was saying, where everybody suddenly got what they wanted, but they still found themselves within the situation, like living situation that they're currently in. So someone living in a $200,000, 1,200 square foot shack in a bad part of town, even if they suddenly didn't have to work and they had an abundance of food and resources, they would probably still want to get into a better situation, like in a better house, a bigger house with a better car. A lot of people probably want a boat and a yacht. Quite a few people probably even want to have a mansion. But the problem is that everybody who wants a mansion can't have a mansion because we would quickly lose space in the world. And but anyway, I digress. Going back, I know this is a really deep rabbit hole that we went down. So I guess we should probably just tie it back before we go off the tracks too much. But just to go back to the question that we were talking about initially, I think that if aliens are here and they are as intelligent as they appear to be with their technology and their understanding of us, they would know that if they suddenly injected even even something that was able to replace 99% of human needs, that it would have serious effects on the structure and even the personal lives of a lot of people. But, it would be fun to sit down and theorize all the ways that society could change in such a situation, because I guess it's possible that could happen. But I think more likely than not, it would have to be a slow injection of technology. And here, dude, this is the perfect segue. We can talk about the increase of scientific and technological advancements in society. And one of the conspiracy theories that I actually personally really like, which is we have been leaking technology into the economy, the world economy, for like decades now, that actually comes from recovered alien technology. Let's jump into that for a second. Like, do you think that, I think we talked about this before, but do you think that technology as we see it today, you could trace it all the way back to its inception and say that, yes, it was 100% fabricated and discovered by humans? Or do you think that there could have been any point in that pathway where certain technologies could have been leaked into the system, or even theories could have been leaked into the system that led us to these technological advancements that we've experienced in the last 100 years, like the transistor, electricity in general? I mean, electricity is a little bit vague, but like more specific technology like the transistor, the computer, certain types of components for computer chips, etc.
I think that's a possibility. Let's go down the super conspiratorial route. So let's take a look. When did the transistor come out? The invention date was December 23rd, 1947. When did the Roswell crash happen? July 1947.
Oh,
what did computers look like
Spaceships
back in the day? These big ass, yes, massive things. And all of a sudden, Roswell, transistor. It's always a possibility. And people, like I've mentioned Bob Lazar before, but he's adamant in that we reverse engineer alien technology from the Roswell crashes that have give us all of the advancements that we have today. And what do you think about the idea that these shows, like in the 60s, like Star Trek and whatnot, were kind of like giving people an idea of what the future might be like? Because they kind of had like iPads and cell phones and, that little scanner like Dr. Crusher had. Yeah, that they say that kind of like inspired the MRI machine. So I think to go down that rabbit hole, that conspiracy theory, I think it's plausible. Yeah. Either they reverse engineered technology from the Roswell crash that gave us the transistor at the end of 1947, or it's all just one big coincidence.
So I think it's probably worth mentioning to people who don't know exactly what a transistor is. I mean, I'm sure everyone, like that old transistor radio, it's like everybody knows the word transistor, but I don't know if a lot of people know exactly what it does or what it means. It's essentially like, think of it like a railroad switch where it controls either ones or zeros. I think there's another component in there. You tell me if I'm off on this one, but I know a transistor has 3 legs. I don't know what the third leg is for, but it's essentially like either power on or power off. So if people aren't really aware what a transistor is, I know a lot of people know the name transistor, and I actually myself don't. I'm not a professional on electronics or this type of technology, but from my understanding, it's essentially like a switch, an electrical switch that controls like positive and negative, or plus or minus, or 1 or 0, to send pulses of electricity that can be used to represent information or commands or some way to control a system. And that is a huge advancement, because if you have a way to tell something or control the pathway of electricity, you can imprint information to a degree like we've seen today with like semiconductors, and that feeding into like graphics cards and stuff like that, just massive leaps and bounds. So I think that I think that human beings have been able to take such technology, whether it was taken from alien technology or not, and be smart enough to extrapolate it and grow it into something that it is today. So I'm not saying that like aliens gave us like, the GeForce RTX 4090, like, we created that ourselves as humans, but the actual, like you said, the very beginning, the very initiation, the initial point of the transistor being quote unquote discovered was such a massive leap for society technologically, and it just happened to come around the time where alien biologics and spacecraft and et cetera were said to have been collected by the government. So I think that it is very possible that 1947 Roswell crash really was the first major exposure that the US government had to alien technology by getting their actual hands on it. Maybe they were aware of it floating around in the sky for a while, but maybe this is the first time in history where they got their hands on it. And they were so excited. It was so new, this whole situation, that they're like, holy shit, this technology is amazing. We need to get this out on the market so we can, capitalize on it and make our economy as strong as possible. Whereas today we know that if we trace it all the way back, they could have very well have set themselves up for discovery, through means of us unraveling the whole pathway back to that initial inception of injecting that technology into society. So yes, I think for sure that there is some validity behind alien technology being leaked into our society. But here's the other side of that we can talk about, which is that technology supposedly came from a crashed alien spacecraft. That wasn't aliens giving us the technology, or it seems like it wasn't them giving us the technology. They could have fabricated some crazy thing where they crash land some, fake bodies or something like that, and an old ship. Who knows? Like, you can speculate all day on that. But at the end of the day, the story is that it's a crashed alien technology that was recovered by humans. It wasn't aliens coming down and giving the technology to us, which kind of leads me into a side track. If these aliens are so advanced, why do you think that they crash so often? Do you think that they have flaws in their technology that is purely, the issue is purely on their end? Or do you think that there is a degree of humans trying to disrupt and destroy them, like you said, with these pulse cannons? Like, have you ever seen that one video, that one like little clip of this point of light in space that was being recorded by a satellite or something, and you see the light kind of go like hovering over the planet, and then a beam of flash of light comes from the lower left-hand corner of the screen, and then you see a streak of light coming up towards that little light, and then it quickly moves out of the way. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I have.
So that kind of leads me to wonder, like, are we actively trying to take down the aliens to get their technology? Or do you think if aliens like suddenly started hovering over major city centers, do you think that the government would engage them, or do you think that we would just get radio silence?
I think it depends. And I like that you brought up that kind of doomsday scenario. And one thing that I wanted to mention before I answer your question on that is that Bob Lazar talked about element 115 for the longest time, and how it was connected to alien technology. I guess it wasn't discovered until 2003, and then finally added to the table of elements, I think, in 2016. And I think he mentioned that element way before it was discovered, like in the early 90s.
You said 115?
Or 80s. So, yeah, I believe so. Moscovium. It's like this. Yeah, it's like this. I might be wrong in the name.
No, you got it right, because it's definitely Moscow in the name, because it was discovered by a joint team of Russian and American. So what do we got to call it? Let's call it Moscovian. That's just kind of so fun.
Moscovian, right? So Bob Lazar talked about element 115 before it was actually discovered and put on the periodic table, saying that this is their power source, and it's highly radioactive as well. But yeah, Bob Lazar was talking about that stuff. Well, he claims to be talking about that stuff before it was even discovered in like the early 90s and the 80s. But I'll digress from Bob Lazar. You should totally check out his podcast that he did with Joe Rogan. And he also has a documentary out there. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but I think it might either be on Netflix or HBO Max, or Max as they call it now. To answer your question, what would our governments do? Well, to be honest with you, human beings, we shoot first and ask questions later. So we might be the architects of our own downfall in that situation. I think they would try to engage with the extraterrestrials and it wouldn't go well. And that's when they would try to talk.
Yeah.
What do you think would happen?
So we can go down, we can talk about that too. But if I actually just want to jump back for a second. Something that, and this is my my investigative / analyst brain going into action here. But so Bob Lazar was talking about element 115, supposedly way back before it was added to the what do you call it, the periodic table. So here's the funny thing with that. He was talking about element 114. Presumably, what did you say he was talking about in the early 90s?
I think like 80s and 90s.
So it just happens to be that around that time period, we were around on the periodic table, we were around that number 115. It is possible that he was just BSing people and saying like, oh, what's the next number on the elemental table? Or what's a number that's towards the top of the elemental table that doesn't exist yet, that hasn't been found yet. And then he just happened to call it element 115. I think the only way that would give any credence to his story or claim on supposed element 115 is if the structural makeup of it matched that of Makovian. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he could have easily just said like, oh, there's this new thing that could be added to the periodic table that I'm just going to call it 115, but there's no properties to it other than it could be feeding advanced alien technology. When in reality, the conflation between Makovian and element 115, when he's talking about it before Makovian was added, it might just be completely unassociated to each other, which is just an unfortunate possible link up there. Onto your question, I think that I don't think governments would be so stupid to just openly fire on. You know who I think what happened? Here's what I think would happen. I think dumb ass people with guns would take pop shots at the aliens in the sky, and that could really create a lot of problems for our first interactions with aliens. Because see, imagine that situation. Imagine if aliens came down and they were peaceful, or they were just curious and they didn't have anything that they wanted to do in a negative fashion. I wonder if there would be a subset of society who would be created to try to take them out. Like, you know, like you see these militia people who are out there like, oh, we got to take down the dark parts of the government. It's all corrupt and we have to like prepare for the downfall of society so we could replace it with a more benevolent, blah, blah, blah. But I think the same thing would happen with alien technology or aliens being here on Earth. I think that people would look at it and be like, no, they're not here to help us. They're here to hurt us. They're here to destroy us. And that uninformed mentality would take over. And we might even see the first attempts at assassinating aliens or taking down their spaceships or something like that. That might just be something that aliens just don't want to deal with in general.
Yeah, you'd have all those people that subscribe to this is one fucking term that I hate so much, and people use it all the time, the deep state. Do I think there's elements of that? You know, an NWO for life, if you remember the WCW stuff. Anytime someone says NWO, I just think of that. I'm sorry. And for those of you that don't know what that is, go look it up on YouTube. It was like the greatest thing ever, especially when we were little kids. It was either DX or NWO getting you in trouble at school. But are there elements of that? Yeah. But I think you're right. You would have people trying to take out the aliens. I don't know how successful they would be. The only thing I could think about that comes to mind is like the aliens beam down. Hello, Earthlings. We come in peace. You shot me. Why'd you shoot me? And it's like they just self-heal and the bullet just like spits out.
That reminds me of there's this one episode of Futurama where it was like the old prospector alien or the old prospector human guy who was going up against Zoidberg's people in some kind of battle, and he was standing there with the American flag, and he's like, you can crush me, but you'll never crush my spirit. And then the claw comes down and smashes him, and you can just hear him from underneath the claw. My spirit. I think you're right on, man. I think that people could try, but I also think that we would probably create some task force within the law enforcement community, the federal law enforcement community, who would make sure these dumbass people would not get so close, just like they do with our political leaders. Because, you know, I mean, I trust me, man, there are law enforcement entities that are watching these militia people in the Midwest or whatever, wherever they're at. They're watching them like a hawk. They're just like literally like not taking their eyes off them. So I bet you any amount of money that if aliens had come down and the prevailing government direction was we need to protect them so we can engage with them, that we would have some kind of task force to keep dumb people from getting too close to them. Not to say they wouldn't try.
Yeah, that is a good point. I hope they do a better job than what happened. I think where the hell was that, in Michigan, where you had these group of people trying to kidnap the mayor or governor or some shit.
Well, did you hear that story?
Like,
did you hear that story in Japan? Shinzo Abe was being assassinated.
Yeah, he got
by that Japanese guy who made that was a while ago. Actually, that was like 5-6 months ago. Hold on, I need to look that up real quick. Shinzo Abe. It was July of last year, so it was about a year ago. But anyway, the crazy thing about that, like you're saying, like if you have a society or a government that's not expecting such a thing, like for example in Japan, nobody owns guns in Japan. Like, I don't know what the laws are for firearms, but I can't recall if this guy, the assassinator, I think he created his own firearm, or maybe he even printed it somehow, like a printed firearm. I'm pretty sure it was homemade, and that it didn't actually come from any like real shell casing, the bullet or whatever. I think it was just a projectile that he fired at him.
Talk about determination. Yeah, holy shit. You really had it up.
Yeah, it was a crazy story. And I actually saw the video of the assassination. And it was pretty intense. And if you look, this is kind of a sidetrack, but if you look at the assassinator's face, like it's like he's just going to the office. Like there's no anger in his face. There's no remorse or resentment. He's just like stone cold. Not even a hint of like displeasure with Shinzo Abe. It's just like he was literally just ordering a coffee. He was just like, he aims the faux gun and then pulls the trigger twice, and then Shinzo Abe goes down, and then the guy just lets himself be tackled. But anyway, I digress. Like I think that you would have people like that coming after any aliens that actually present themselves. But here's another side concept with that, like thinking about what people would perceive of the aliens. It could very well be that a lot of people just don't believe these aliens are really aliens, because look at the religious aspects. Like you said, I think this ties back into the people you were talking about who would have to come to serious terms of their existence. They would really question whether or not these aliens are truly extraterrestrial, or they're like demons or something, like something from another plane of existence that has to do with a major religion like Christianity or Judaism or whatever, or Islam.
I'm glad you brought that up, because did you see the reports? And it's not anything to do with religion, but the whole concept of like demons and monsters and stuff like that. Did you hear the reports that came out of Peru a few days ago?
No, please tell.
Peruvian villagers claim they were attacked by a predator-style alien. So this is from Vibe.com. I don't know how legitimate this news source is. I know. I saw it on Twitter as well, but it's fun. And they have a video of what is suspected to be the predator. So basically, this indigenous group of people in rural Alto Nane claim to see a beast that attacked a 15-year-old girl and slashed her across the neck. And it said that hunters from the tribe fired at the creature, but it was armored, and that it was immune to human weapons. And they think, those people think it might be aliens from another planet. And they said that these things were about 7 feet tall. So having heard that, we could wrap it up with this question. Whenever disclosure happens, do you think the extraterrestrials will be hostile, or would they be peaceful?
I think that I'm going to stick with my original perspective or stance that I think the aliens would probably be neutral to peaceful. I think that if aliens really were here to hurt us, they would have done it a long time ago, because they clearly have the means to do so. If they wanted us gone, or they wanted our DNA altered, or whatever terrible thing that would remove us as people, as humans from society, they could have done it 100 years ago. Then again, the other side to that conversation is, like we were saying before in the podcast, if aliens truly have been crashing across the globe for a number of years, that means they have some kind of flaw in their technology that is either exploitable by the human beings that are taking aim at them, or their shit just doesn't work sometimes, which means that they aren't so advanced. They aren't as advanced as we perceive them to be. And that could very well mean that they're here to, imagine a situation where the aliens that are present Maybe there isn't an abundance of them. Maybe they're dying out. Maybe maybe they have such a limited number of advanced technological resources that even though it's advanced beyond our current capability, maybe they don't have enough of their resources to destroy us. But then again, you can also say it doesn't really take much to fabricate some virus or some DNA altering technology or whatever dispersal of something that would spread across the surface of the earth. Just to go back, I don't think they're here to take our land, to take our planet. I think that they're more than likely neutral. They're probably here to study us. If not, maybe they're the fabricators or the instigators of our advancement as human beings, and they're just trying to, indirectly help us along. I do tend to believe in the scientific perspective that most people, as you become more intelligent, as you become more open to different ideas and concepts, and you try to have a more open mind and take in technology or take in information objectively, you tend to have people who are more peaceful, who are more patient, who have more beautiful thoughts and beautiful art creations and things that tie into this whole grand scheme of the connectivity of the universe. Like for instance, when we look at the James Webb Space Telescope photo of deep space and all of those other galaxies that are either being born or have probably long since died out. We're just seeing lights of them when they were around. Like all of the life that could be encompassed in that photo, either past or future, like that concept of possible advanced life where, like, think about, we have terrible things on this earth in our societies, but we also have really beautiful things too. And I think those beautiful things they come from our advanced side as human beings and what we reflect upon in terms of our nature of existence and reality. So I tend to hope that aliens who have evolved to a state to that high of an intelligence level, they would have more of a beautiful, kind of like more of a sensitive, more open-minded perspective to the nature of reality. And they're just not cold, consuming scientific studiers who don't give two Fs about the nature of existence or life. I think that it's more likely than not that they actually do care about life and that they would want to preserve it.
I am of the same mind. I think that if you are at a point in your civilization where you could travel across the galaxy, you're at a point where you're past war and conquering of other civilizations. It's more so just wanting to explore and interact with other civilizations if applicable. But on the hypothetical side, on the doomsdayer side, these aliens might be the Covenant from Halo, and they might be coming down to get us. Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and most podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe and share. Also, don't forget to give a follow on Instagram at twroadpodcast and follow my TikTok at twrpodcast. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.